AITA for refusing to lend my sister money after she spent it on a vacation instead of paying her debts. I, 29M, have a sister, Sarah, 27F, who has always been a bit irresponsible with money. We grew up in a household where financial literacy was not exactly a priority, and I think that's contributed to both of us having different approaches to handling money as adults. I'm pretty strict about saving, budgeting, and sticking to financial goals. Sarah, on the other hand, tends to spend impulsively, and when things get tight, she'll ask for help from friends or family. A couple of months ago, Sarah called me in a panic. She had fallen behind on several bills and was struggling to make ends meet. She asked me if I could lend her $3,000 to cover her rent and some other expenses. Now, we've had this dynamic before. She gets into financial trouble, asks for help. I give her a loan with the expectation that she'll pay me back, and then I rarely see that money again. I lent her money a few times in the past, and I never felt like I got my money back on time. Still, I helped because I'm her brother, and I didn't want her to suffer. But this time, I was really hesitant. I've been saving for a down payment on a house, and I've been working my ass off to get my finances in order. I also knew that Sarah wasn't exactly proactive about managing her finances, and I didn't want to be an enabler for her bad habits. I told her I needed to think about it before making any decisions. A week went by, and I still hadn't decided. Then, I saw a post on social media from Sarah. It was a picture of her at some tropical resort, enjoying a lavish vacation with friends. She was posting pictures of herself lounging on the beach, enjoying fancy cocktails, and posting updates about how much fun she was having. My first reaction was disbelief. She had just asked me for money to cover her bills, and now she was spending who knows how much on this trip. I was furious. I texted her immediately, asking what the hell was going on. She responded with something like, "It's a work trip, I needed a break, and I can afford it." I was still processing the anger when she called me. She apologized for not telling me beforehand, explaining that the trip had been planned months ago, and she couldn't cancel it because she had already paid for the flight and accommodation. She also mentioned that she had been working remotely while at the resort, so it wasn't exactly a vacation in her eyes. I didn't buy it. Here's why. If she was struggling to pay bills and asking me for money, why would she prioritize a trip over taking care of her finances? And why would she think it was okay to ask for money, all while clearly not managing her funds well? This wasn't the first time she had shown questionable spending habits, and I felt like I was constantly being asked to bail her out when things went wrong. I told her I couldn't lend her any money this time. She tried to argue, saying that it wasn't fair for me to judge her decision to go on a trip when I didn't understand how hard things had been for her. She said she needed the trip to recharge and that her mental health was really struggling. I get it. I know life can be stressful, but it didn't change the fact that she hadn't prioritized her responsibilities. We got into a huge argument. I told her that if she could afford a vacation, she didn't need my help with anything. She was upset and told me that I was being heartless and selfish, that I was making her feel like she wasn't allowed to enjoy life. I told her that the reality was she needed to be more responsible, and if she didn't take her finances seriously, she was going to keep getting herself into these situations. She didn't want to hear it and ended up hanging up on me. Since then, our relationship has been strained. I haven't heard from her much, and when we've spoken, it's been awkward. She's been posting on social media about how much fun she's having on her trip, and it just feels like she's rubbing it in. I'm not saying she shouldn't enjoy herself, but I'm frustrated by the double standard. She asks for financial help, but doesn't take responsibility for her actions. I've been talking to some of our mutual friends about the situation, and most of them think I did the right thing by standing my ground. But there are a few who think I should have been more understanding and lent her the money, especially since she's going through a tough time. Now, I'm starting to second-guess myself. Did I overreact? Should I have been more empathetic, knowing that she was struggling emotionally? Or was I right to refuse because her actions didn't line up with her words? I want to help my sister, but I also don't want to be taken advantage of. AITA for not lending her the money, given the circumstances. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot and motivates me to create even more amazing content just for you. Make sure to turn on notifications so you'll never miss out on a new video. I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for your support. It truly helps the channel grow. AITA for choosing not to help my parents with their house after they refused to let me live there. So, here's the situation. I'm a 27-year-old woman, and my parents, who are in their mid-50s, have been asking me to come over to their house and help out with various things over the years. I get that they're getting older, and they could use some extra hand around the house. But I've always felt like I was walking a fine line between being helpful and being taken advantage of. Let me give you some context. I've always had a somewhat strained relationship with my parents. They're well-meaning, but they can be controlling and overly protective. When I was 18, they practically begged me not to go to college far from home. They insisted that I stay local and attend a nearby university. I really wanted to go out of state, but they convinced me that I wouldn't be able to handle it, that I needed to stay close to them for my own safety. So I compromised and stayed at the local university, living at home throughout my entire college career. I was the only one of my friends who didn't experience any sort of dorm life or independence. Fast forward to a few years later, and I've graduated and started working. The job I got wasn't ideal, but it's a stable position that pays the bills, and I've been able to move out and live on my own in a small apartment. My parents weren't thrilled about it, but they accepted it, even though they tried to make me feel guilty for leaving. "Why don't you stay here for just a bit longer?" they asked. "You don't know what the world is like out there. It's so dangerous." But I was determined to carve out my own space and live independently, so I stuck with my decision to rent my own place. Now, about a year ago, my parents bought a bigger house. They've been talking about it for a while, and honestly, I didn't think it would happen. The house is about 40 minutes away from where I live now, and it's a huge upgrade from their old place. It's more of a dream house for them, and they were really excited when they moved in. They even invited me over for the grand tour, which was a big deal for them. But when I went to visit, I noticed that there was a lot of work left to be done. They've been talking about how they needed help with things like unpacking boxes, organizing the garage, painting the guest room, and gardening. At first, I thought they just wanted a little help, maybe a few weekends to pitch in. But over the months, they started asking for more and more. My mom would text me almost every day asking for my help with something. "Can you come over tomorrow and help with the yard? We need someone to help assemble the furniture. Could you come and help paint the bathroom this weekend?" It was always something, and I couldn't keep up. I work long hours during the week and have my own social life and responsibilities, so I started saying no. Eventually, they started to get a little passive-aggressive about it. I would get comments like, "I guess we'll have to figure it out ourselves. We didn't ask you to help when we moved in, but it would have been nice." Or my dad would joke, "Maybe you just don't care enough about us to help out." The turning point came when I had a conversation with my mom about it. I had to cancel on her for the third weekend in a row because I had plans and she wasn't happy. She said, "We really wanted you to be part of this new chapter of our lives. We thought you want to help us make this house a home. But I guess we were wrong." I was frustrated by the guilt trip and finally snapped. I told her that I had my own life and responsibilities and couldn't drop everything to help with their house every time they asked. I also pointed out that I had done my fair share of helping over the years, and that I wasn't obligated to help with every little thing. Well, my mom didn't take that well at all. She said she was disappointed in me and that it really hurt her feelings that I was unwilling to help. My dad, who had been mostly quiet during this exchange, chimed in and said, "If you were really family, you'd want to help us. We raised you, after all." I was stunned. It felt like they were manipulating me into feeling guilty for not wanting to give up my weekends to cater to their whims. And I told them exactly that. I said that I loved them, but I wasn't going to put my life on hold for them every weekend. They were adults who could hire help if they needed it. My parents were financially well off and could afford to pay someone to help with the work around the house, but they always insisted that they didn't need to. The conversation ended with my mom saying, "Maybe we were wrong to think you'd want to be involved." And that's when things really took a turn. Now, a few months later, they're still asking for my help, but I've been firm about saying no. And to be honest, things have gotten a little awkward. My parents have started giving me the cold shoulder whenever I visit or call, and they make passive comments like, "It's too bad you don't want to help your family." It's clear they're upset, but I feel like they're the ones being unreasonable. So, here's the thing. I'm starting to feel like they're trying to guilt-trip me into being their unpaid assistant just because I'm their daughter. But at the same time, I'm wondering if I'm being too hard on them. After all, they did raise me, and maybe they just want to spend time with me, even if it's through helping them with their house. AITA for choosing not to help them with their house after they refused to let me live there when I was younger? Am I being unreasonable for wanting to maintain some boundaries? Or should I be more supportive and just suck it up? I really don't know what to do at this point. AITA for calling out my cousin for her behavior at a family gathering? So a bit of background before I dive into the issue. I, 29M, have a pretty large extended family. There are a lot of cousins, aunts, uncles, etc., and because of the size, we don't all hang out regularly, but we do have some major family gatherings throughout the year. One of these gatherings took place recently, and that's when things went sideways. Let me introduce you to my cousin, Sarah, 27F. Sarah has always been a bit over the top, if I'm being honest. She's loud, often exaggerates stories, and tends to put herself at the center of attention. It's never been something I minded too much. After all, she's family, and I try to be patient with her. But over time, I've noticed that her behavior has gotten a bit more out of hand, and it's starting to affect how people view her. Anyway, during this particular family gathering, we were all hanging out in my aunt's living room. It was a pretty relaxed afternoon. We were talking, eating, catching up. Nothing too special. At some point, Sarah started going on about how she was basically going to be the next big influencer on social media. She'd been talking about this for a while, but it wasn't anything too new. What was different this time was how she started bragging about the way she's basically already made it and how much money she's earning from sponsored posts, etc. I've seen her post some things on social media, but nothing that I would consider noteworthy. She has a decent following, but it's all very niche content. And to be blunt, she tends to oversell her success. I didn't think much of it at first, just smiled and nodded, but then she began talking about how her followers were so loyal and buy everything she promotes, including a new skincare product line she was launching soon. She even pulled out some random bottles and started showing them off to everyone, claiming they were sponsored samples from top brands. I think everyone in the room was a little uncomfortable, but no one really said anything. Everyone just kind of politely smiled or changed the topic when they could. The thing is, Sarah wasn't letting it go. She started making a huge deal out of how ungrateful people in the world are for not recognizing the hustle it takes to make it like she has, and that's when I lost a bit. I've been busting my ass in my corporate job for the past several years, working long hours and building my career from the ground up. I've always been a bit more private about things like money and success, but it didn't sit right with me that Sarah, someone who I felt wasn't being entirely genuine about her career, was acting as though she was better than everyone else. So I spoke up. I said, it's really easy to act like you've made it when you're just posting pictures online. I mean, good for you if you're doing well, but it's not the same as working a real job with real responsibilities. I think everyone in the room was a bit shocked, but I felt like someone needed to say it. Sarah, naturally, didn't take kindly to that. She immediately started defending herself, saying things like, well, maybe some of us don't have to slum it in a 9-to-5 job just to get by, and that my job was boring and predictable while hers was glamorous and exciting. I wasn't even trying to start a fight, but the conversation kept escalating. Other family members began chiming in, some trying to play peacemaker and others just agreeing with Sarah because, I guess, they didn't want to rock the boat. But I felt like I couldn't back down now. So I said, look, I'm not saying that what you do is easy, but there's a huge difference between what you're doing and actual, tangible work that has real-world impact. That's when my aunt, who is Sarah's mom, stepped in. She said I was being rude and condescending and that I needed to respect Sarah's success, whatever that might be. That really pissed me off because I felt like no one was calling out Sarah for her inflated ego. I've always been taught that success shouldn't be a competition and that it's better to remain humble. But here was Sarah acting like she was better than all of us because of her online presence. At this point, the mood in the room had soured. People were trying to lighten the mood, but the damage was done. I eventually just said, fine, I'll leave if you all don't want to hear the truth, and left. I know that was a bit dramatic, but I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. Now, a few days have passed, and I've been getting messages from other family members, mostly my cousins, telling me that I shouldn't have called Sarah out like that. They said I made things awkward and that I should have just let her enjoy her moment. Some of them are even saying that I'm just jealous of her success. I get it. Nobody likes conflict at family gatherings. But honestly, I feel like I wasn't wrong. I wasn't trying to ruin anyone's day, but I couldn't just sit there and watch Sarah act like she was superior to everyone else. My family doesn't usually handle these kinds of situations well. I'm starting to wonder if I overreacted. So, AITA for calling out my cousin in front of everyone for bragging about her success and putting down my job? Or was I justified in speaking up when I did? AITA for refusing to help my brother financially after he spent all his money on gambling? I, 28M, have a brother, Jake, 30M, who has always had issues with managing money. We grew up in a lower-income family, and while my parents did their best, we didn't have a lot of extra funds to throw around. Because of that, my brother and I were both taught the importance of being responsible with money. I took that lesson to heart, but Jake, well, not so much. Over the years, I've watched him struggle financially, but things took a real turn for the worse when he started gambling. At first, it was just small bets on sports games, nothing too out of the ordinary. But it quickly escalated. He started going to casinos, betting on everything he could, and using credit cards to fund his habit. He lost a significant amount of money, but each time he hit rock bottom, he would promise to stop and beg for help. As his younger brother, I always tried to help him out. At first, I gave him small amounts of money to help cover his bills or pay off some debts. But over the years, the requests got bigger and more frequent, and I started to feel like I was enabling him. A few months ago, Jake came to me again. This time, he was in serious trouble. He had maxed out all his credit cards, taken out personal loans, and borrowed money from friends and family just to keep the gambling going. He came to me saying that if I didn't help him out, he would lose everything: his apartment, his car, his job, which he could barely hold on to due to his addiction. And most importantly, his relationship with his girlfriend, Sarah. I knew that this wasn't the first time I had heard these kinds of promises. I also knew that giving him money wasn't going to fix anything. But I couldn't just stand by and watch him lose everything, could I? So, I made a decision. I told him that I wasn't going to give him any more money. Not a penny. I explained that I loved him, but I couldn't keep bailing him out. I told him he needed to take responsibility for his actions and get professional help. He argued with me, told me I was being cruel, and that he had nowhere else to turn. I stood firm, even though it hurt me to see him in such a bad place. He left my apartment, fuming, and I didn't hear from him for a couple of days. A week later, my parents called me. They were furious with me for not helping Jake. They said I was being selfish and that I was letting my brother spiral out of control. They argued that family should always be there for each other, no matter what. I tried to explain to them why I made the decision, but they didn't understand. They were too focused on the idea that I should be doing whatever I can to help him, no matter how many times he had messed up in the past. Then, I got a message from Sarah, Jake's girlfriend. She was upset with me too. She said I had abandoned Jake and that he was in a really bad place. She begged me to reconsider, even offering to pay me back if I could help Jake get back on his feet. I told her I appreciated the offer, but that my decision still stood. After all, it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about breaking the cycle and forcing Jake to take responsibility for his own actions. I felt bad, I really did. But deep down, I knew I was doing the right thing. I didn't want to enable Jake's addiction anymore, and I couldn't afford to let him keep taking advantage of my goodwill. My parents didn't understand, and neither did Sarah. It felt like everyone was against me. A couple of weeks went by, and I heard that Jake had hit rock bottom. He lost his apartment, his car, and Sarah left him. He was in a horrible place, and I couldn't help but feel guilty. I know I shouldn't have felt that way, but the guilt was eating me up. I kept thinking that maybe if I had just helped him out one more time, things wouldn't have turned out like this. Then, a few days ago, I received a message from Jake. It was short and to the point. I hit rock bottom. I'm finally getting help. I'm sorry I pushed you away. I get it now. It was the first time in years that Jake had taken responsibility for his actions. I was relieved to hear that he was seeking help, but it didn't take away the guilt I felt. I'm glad he's finally getting treatment, but I still wonder if I did the right thing. Did I push him too hard? Should I have helped him, even if it meant enabling his addiction just a little longer? Should I have been more supportive, even if that meant offering financial help again? My parents are still angry with me. They don't think I should have cut Jake off like I did, and they're still blaming me for his situation. Sarah hasn't spoken to me much either, though I understand why. Everyone seems to think I was too harsh, but at the same time, I see the progress Jake is making. He's going to therapy, he's been sober for a week now, and he seems genuinely committed to changing his life. It's just hard not to second-guess myself after all the pressure from my family. So, AITA for refusing to help my brother financially, even though I know he's struggling? Edit. I read a lot of your comments and messages, and I appreciate all the support and advice. A few things I want to clarify, ***. 1. I've tried everything before ***. This wasn't just a one-time issue. I've helped Jake countless times over the years, both financially and emotionally. Each time, I was promised things would change, but they never did. It's always been the same cycle. Help him, he relapses, and then he's back asking for more money. 2. I didn't abandon him ***. I didn't cut him off completely. I've offered emotional support, and I've told him repeatedly that I want him to get help. I'm not shutting him out of my life. I'm just refusing to give him money anymore. I've been clear with him that I love him, but I can't enable his addiction. 3. I'm still unsure if I did the right thing ***. I'm getting some mixed feedback here, and I'm honestly still wrestling with whether I made the right call. But I do know that I can't keep bailing him out indefinitely. Thank you again for all the feedback. It's been really helpful to hear different perspectives. AITA for refusing to help my best friend after she lied to me about her situation and now expects me to bail her out? I, 28M, have a best friend, Jess, 29F, who I've known for over 10 years. We met in college and have been through a lot together. Over the years, we've both been there for each other through breakups, job losses, family problems, and everything in between. I've always considered her one of the closest people in my life, and I've supported her in many ways. But lately, I'm starting to feel like I've been putting way more into this friendship than she has. A few months ago, Jess came to me asking for help. She told me that she was having financial problems and was behind on her rent and bills. She said that her car had broken down, and she was struggling to cover the repair costs. Jess explained that she had a lot of unexpected expenses and wasn't able to make ends meet. She asked me if I could lend her $2,500 to get her finances back on track, and because of our history and how close we were, I agreed. I didn't have that much money just lying around, but I had saved up a decent amount, so I agreed to give her the money. I told her that I'd be happy to help, but I would need to be repaid within 6 months. She agreed and thanked me profusely. I trusted her, and I didn't think twice about helping her out because I considered her family. However, things took a turn a few weeks later. I hadn't heard from Jess much after I gave her the money. I thought she was just busy getting her life together, but I started noticing some things that seemed off. She posted on social media about going out to fancy dinners with her boyfriend, going on weekend trips, and attending events. I didn't say anything at first, but it started to eat away at me. I knew that she had said she was struggling, so seeing her living it up made me question whether she was really in as much trouble as she had claimed. Eventually, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I texted Jess and asked her how things were going. I also mentioned that I hadn't received any updates from her about paying me back. She responded with a vague message about life being busy and promised to send me money soon, but that was the last I heard from her for almost a month. A month later, I ran into Jess while I was out with some friends. She was with her boyfriend, and they were both dressed in expensive clothes and seemed to be having a great time. I tried to approach the situation carefully. I said, "Hey, I've been waiting for an update on the money. I know you said things were tight, but I've been seeing all these posts, and I just want to make sure everything is okay." She got defensive almost immediately, saying that I was being rude and judgmental. She told me that she had a really tough time, but that she was working on it. I didn't push further at the time because I didn't want to cause a scene, but I could tell that something wasn't right. The next day, I decided to ask a couple of mutual friends if they knew anything about Jess's situation. I was honestly just trying to understand what was going on. One of our friends told me that Jess had recently bought a new phone and that she had been making plans to go on a weekend getaway with her boyfriend. I was shocked, and it only made me feel more betrayed. That night, I confronted Jess. I told her that I had heard from others that she was spending money on things that didn't align with the financial trouble she had described. She tried to deflect at first, but eventually she admitted that she had exaggerated the extent of her financial struggles. The truth was that her car repair was nowhere near as expensive as she had led me to believe, and while she had fallen behind on some bills, it wasn't nearly as dire as she had made it sound. She also admitted that she had been using the money I lent her for things like shopping, eating out, and trips with her boyfriend. I was livid. I told her that I felt completely betrayed and that I had trusted her. She apologized and tried to explain herself, saying that she was embarrassed to admit how bad things were and that she had been trying to maintain a facade of having it all together. She said that she didn't want to let me down or make me think that she couldn't manage her own life, so she made everything seem worse than it was. I told her that while I understood that she had been embarrassed, it didn't excuse her actions. She had lied to me, and now I was left feeling like a fool for giving her money. She promised to pay me back as soon as possible, but I wasn't convinced. Since that conversation, things have been incredibly tense between us. Jess has reached out a few times, apologizing again, but I've been hesitant to engage. I feel like I can't trust her anymore, and I'm honestly not sure if I want to continue lending her money or even being as close as we were before. I've been putting off bringing up the repayment again because I'm still hurt by how she handled everything, and I don't know how to move forward. Some of my friends say I'm being too harsh on her, that she was just embarrassed and didn't know how to ask for help. They think I should just let it go and work on rebuilding the friendship. Others agree with me, saying that she crossed a line and that I shouldn't let her off the hook so easily. I feel like I'm caught in the middle. I want to be a good friend, but I also don't want to be taken advantage of again. I don't know if I'm being unreasonable by not forgiving her fully and by still feeling so hurt by what she did. AITA for refusing to help my best friend after she lied to me about her financial situation and used the money I lent her for non-essential things? Should I just let it go and try to fix the friendship, or do I have a right to feel betrayed? AITA for refusing to give my sister my car after she totaled hers? I, 28F, have a younger sister, Hannah, 24F, and we've always had a pretty typical sibling relationship. We get along for the most part, but there's always been a bit of competition between us. Growing up, my parents always praised me for being responsible and a good role model, while Hannah was more rebellious and carefree. That dynamic hasn't changed much as we've gotten older, though we both have our own lives and careers now. About a year ago, I saved up enough money to buy a new car. I've been driving an old beater for years, and finally, I was able to purchase a reliable, newer model. I was proud of it because it felt like a real milestone for me, and I was finally able to get something that I could trust. I always took good care of my car, made sure it was maintained, and kept it clean. Hannah, on the other hand, had always been a bit reckless with her vehicles. She's had a few accidents over the years, and her driving record isn't the best. I've tried to talk to her about being more careful on the road, but she tends to brush it off and doesn't take my concerns seriously. Last year, she got into a pretty bad accident with her car, and it was totaled. Thankfully, she was okay, but the car was a complete loss. My parents helped her out with getting a new one, but it wasn't long before she started complaining about how unreliable it was. She kept making excuses, and in the back of my mind, I had a feeling that she wasn't being careful with it. A couple of months ago, I found out that Hannah had totaled her car again. It wasn't a major crash, but it was enough to make the car undrivable. She wasn't hurt, but once again, my parents were on the phone trying to figure out how to help her get a new one. At this point, I was getting frustrated with the situation. She was being reckless, and I didn't understand why she couldn't take responsibility for her actions. I know accidents happen, but 2 in a row seemed like more than just bad luck. One evening, I was sitting at home when Hannah called me. I was expecting it to be about the crash, but instead, she came right out and asked if she could have my car. Apparently, my parents had suggested that I let her borrow it until she could get a new car, but she was asking for something more permanent. She said she needed a reliable car, and since I had just bought mine, it would make sense for me to give it to her since I could afford to get another one. She told me that I didn't need to worry about the money because it's family, and that she would totally pay me back for it in a few months. I was shocked. I know that she was in a tough spot, but there was no way I was giving up my car for her. I had worked hard for it, and I needed it for my own life. I've been commuting for work, and I have a lot of responsibilities that rely on having a reliable car. But more than that, I was frustrated. It felt like she was just expecting me to fix her problems again, and I wasn't okay with that. I told her that I couldn't give her my car. I explained that it wasn't just about the car itself, but about the principle of it. She had already totaled 2 cars, and I didn't think it was responsible to give her something as important as my vehicle. I told her she needed to take more responsibility for her actions and find a way to get a car on her own. I reminded her that my car was something I'd saved for, and I wasn't willing to sacrifice it for her mistakes. She didn't take it well. She started yelling at me over the phone, calling me selfish and saying that I didn't care about her. She accused me of being stingy and acting like I was better than her because I could afford my car while she couldn't. She said that I should be willing to help her out since we were family, and it wasn't like I was using it all the time. She made it sound like I was hoarding my car just to make her feel bad. My parents got involved and called me, tried to convince me to help her out. They said that it would be a nice gesture, and they reminded me that I was in a better financial situation. They also pointed out that since she'd been in an accident, it would be a nice way to show I cared. I was really upset at this point because they seemed to be siding with her and ignoring the fact that I had worked hard for my car and that it was my decision to make. I told them no, and after a tense conversation, they dropped it, though I could tell they were disappointed in me. Hannah hasn't spoken to me much since that phone call, and whenever we do talk, it's awkward. I know she's angry with me, and our relationship has felt strained ever since. I'm starting to wonder if I made the wrong call. I know that helping her out would have been the nice thing to do, but I'm struggling with the feeling that she's taking advantage of me. I also feel like if I give her my car, she won't learn from her mistakes, and she'll just keep expecting others to bail her out when things go wrong. So, AITA for refusing to give my sister my car? Am I being too harsh by not helping her, or is it reasonable to stand my ground and not let her take advantage of me? AITA for exposing my sister-in-law's lies and ruining her relationship with my family? I, 30M, have a pretty close-knit family. We're not perfect, but we try to support each other through the ups and downs. I have a brother, Ryan, 28M, who has been dating his girlfriend, Jessica, 26F, for about 3 years now. I've always been skeptical of Jessica because, to be honest, she's always acted a little fake around the family. But Ryan is head over heels for her, and for the most part, I just kept my thoughts to myself. I didn't want to be the guy who caused trouble. However, things started to get weird when Jessica began to show more of her true colors over time. She has a tendency to exaggerate, often telling crazy stories about how she's had all these amazing experiences that just didn't seem to add up. She'd constantly talk about being so successful and working with important people, but every time we tried to ask for specifics, she would change the subject or get defensive. I'm no detective, but I started noticing little inconsistencies in her stories, and I couldn't help but think something was off. One example is when she claimed that she had a major business partnership with a well-known company. She went on and on about how she had been invited to their headquarters for a special event, but when I casually asked about it a few days later, she gave me a completely different version of the story that didn't make sense. Eventually, she just stopped talking about it altogether. Then there was the time she said she had flown out of the country for a job interview with an international company. Ryan was proud of her and kept mentioning how amazing she was. But when I asked Jessica what the company was, she stuttered, changed the subject, and then claimed it was confidential information. To me, it was becoming obvious that she wasn't being truthful, but I didn't want to stir the pot. But then everything blew up at a family gathering, and I ended up exposing her. It started off like any other family barbecue. We were all hanging out at my parents' house, eating, drinking, and talking. Jessica was there, as usual, and this time she was making more outlandish claims than ever. She was talking about how she had recently been in a meeting with the CEO of a major tech company and was on the verge of closing a huge deal. She even made it sound like she had her own team of employees working under her. My dad, who is a retired businessman, asked some specific questions about the company, the deal, and her role in it. Jessica started to get flustered and couldn't give straight answers. Her stories became more inconsistent, and she started to seem visibly uncomfortable. At one point, she was talking to my cousin, Maggie about a luxury vacation she had taken. Maggie asked where she had gone, and Jessica mentioned a private island in the Caribbean, which sounded way too extravagant to be true. But the thing is, my cousin Maggie had been to that island recently herself. Maggie started asking Jessica for details about the trip, trying to get Jessica to confirm some of the things she had mentioned in passing. That's when Jessica slipped up. She said something that didn't match Maggie's experience at all. Maggie looked confused, and I could see that something was off. Jessica quickly covered it up, but the damage was done. Maggie wasn't buying her story. Now, my cousin isn't one to stay quiet about things, so she started poking around a bit more. She asked Jessica what kind of room she had stayed in, how much the trip cost, and what activities she had done while she was there. Jessica got more and more defensive and eventually stormed off, saying she was tired of being interrogated. That's when I decided enough was enough. I knew I couldn't let this go on any longer, and I felt a responsibility to protect my family from being manipulated. So, in front of everyone, I spoke up. I said, Jessica, I've been hearing a lot of stories from you lately, and I'm starting to wonder how much of it is actually true. The room fell silent, and everyone turned to look at me. Ryan, of course, looked confused and defensive, but I continued. You've been talking about these business deals, these vacations, and meetings with CEOs, but it's always vague details and no proof. I don't want to be rude, but it feels like you've been making things up. I think it's time we all have a conversation about what's really going on. Jessica turned red, and for a moment, it seemed like she was going to explode. But she didn't. Instead, she tried to laugh it off. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice high-pitched. You're just jealous, aren't you? She then made some snide remark about how I was just jealous of her success. That's when I dropped the bomb. I'm not jealous, Jessica. I'm just trying to understand how someone can be so successful yet have no actual evidence of it. You've been saying all this stuff about your career and lifestyle, but you never have any proof to back it up. And now Maggie is calling you out for lying about your vacation. This isn't the first time you've exaggerated or made up stories. At this point, Ryan's face went pale. He tried to defend her, but the more he spoke, the more it became obvious that even he had started to question some of her claims. Jessica went quiet for a moment before she stood up and, in a shaky voice, said, You're all just jealous. I don't have to prove anything to any of you. She stormed out of the house, and after that, things got messy. Ryan tried calling her, but she wouldn't answer. My parents were upset with me for bringing this up in front of everyone, and they said I had humiliated her. They argued that I could have handled it in a more private way, but I genuinely thought it was time to expose her behavior, and I felt like my family needed to know what was really going on. Ryan hasn't spoken to me much since, and he's definitely distancing himself from the family. Now, I'm starting to feel guilty. Maybe I did overstep, but at the same time, I feel like Jessica needed to be called out for all the lies. I was trying to protect my family from being taken advantage of, and I don't want anyone else to fall for her stories. But the backlash from Ryan, my parents, and even some of my other relatives has been pretty intense. So, AITA for exposing my sister-in-law's lies and ruining her relationship with my family? AITA for refusing to help my friend move after they've consistently ignored my own requests for help in the past? I, 29F, have a close friend, Mia, 30F, who I've known since college. We've been through a lot together, and while our friendship has had its ups and downs, we've always managed to work things out. However, recently, I've started to feel like I've been taken for granted in our friendship, and I'm not sure how to handle it anymore. A few months ago, Mia told me that she was moving to a new apartment in a different part of the city. She was excited about the change, and I was happy for her. She asked if I would be willing to help her move on moving day. Normally, I wouldn't hesitate to help her out, but there's a bit of history between us that made me hesitant this time. For the past few years, I've been in a bit of a tough spot financially. I'm working 2 jobs, and while I'm making ends meet, I don't have a lot of extra time or money to spare. There have been several times in the past where I've asked Mia for help, whether it was with moving, picking me up from the airport, or just helping me out with something minor, and each time she has either ignored my request or made an excuse. The most recent example was about 6 months ago when I asked her to help me move into a new apartment. She promised she would be there, But on the day of my move, she texted me at the last minute saying she had to help a family member and couldn't come. I was left scrambling, trying to get everything done myself. Now, I'm not saying I expect Mia to drop everything for me every time I ask for help, but it's been a pattern. Every time I've needed her, she's either been too busy or come up with some other excuse. After that last time, I realized I was the only one making any effort to be there for her. She didn't ask how my move went, and she didn't offer to help me in any way afterward. I kept letting it slide because I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, but deep down I was hurt. So, when Mia reached out to ask if I would help her move, I took a moment to think it over. I knew she needed help, and I genuinely wanted to be there for her. But I also knew that this was an opportunity to stand up for myself. I wanted to help, but I didn't want to be the one always giving and never receiving anything in return. I decided to be honest with her and told her that I wasn't sure if I could help her with the move. I explained that I was feeling burned out from always being the one to help, and that I needed her to be more reliable when I asked for help in the past. I wasn't demanding anything drastic, just a little reciprocity. I made it clear that if she wanted me to help, I needed her to step up and help me when I needed it. Her response was not what I expected. She was angry. She said I was being unreasonable and that she didn't have time to keep track of favors in a friendship. She accused me of being selfish and said that she had always been there for me in the past, which, to be honest, I didn't feel was entirely true. She told me that it was a big deal that she was moving, and that I was making it about myself. She said that I should be a good friend and just help her out, no questions asked. I tried to explain that it wasn't about the move itself, but about the ongoing pattern in our friendship where I felt like I was always the one giving. But Mia was having none of it. She said that she didn't want to be friends with someone who kept score, and that if I didn't help her, we should just stop pretending to be close. That really hurt. I didn't want to lose her as a friend, but at the same time, I didn't want to keep sacrificing my own time and energy without feeling like it was ever returned. I told her I couldn't help, and that maybe we should take some time to figure out if this friendship was working for both of us. Since then, I haven't heard from her much. She's posted some vague status updates on social media about toxic people and ungrateful friends, which I'm pretty sure are aimed at me. It's been a couple of weeks, and I still feel conflicted. On one hand, I feel like I did the right thing by standing up for myself. On the other hand, I miss our friendship and feel guilty about not being there when she needed help. Now, my other friends are weighing in, and most of them think I was right to stand my ground. They've told me that Mia has a history of being unreliable, and that I've always been the one doing the heavy lifting in our friendship. They also pointed out that Mia doesn't seem to value me as much as I value her. But some of them also think I should have just helped her out because friends help each other, and that I'm overthinking the situation. I can't help but feel like I might have taken things too far. I never wanted to make it about keeping score or being petty. I just wanted Mia to understand that I need support too. So, AITA for refusing to help my friend move after she's consistently ignored my requests for help in the past. Edit. I've read a lot of your comments, and I just wanted to clarify a few things. 1. I'm not keeping score in the sense of counting every favor or keeping a tally of who owes who what. It's more about the fact that when I needed her, Mia didn't come through. It's not just the one time she bailed on my move, it's a pattern that's gone on for years. 2. I care about Mia, but at some point, I have to take care of myself too. It's been emotionally exhausting being the only one who seems to care about the balance of our friendship. 3. I'm not happy about how things have turned out. I miss our friendship, but I'm also starting to see that I might have been more invested in it than she was. Thanks again for all the feedback. It's helping me gain perspective on the situation. Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for not attending my friend's wedding after she asked me to give up my vacation plans to attend. I, 32M, have a friend, Emily, 31F, who I've known since we were in high school. Over the years, we've had our ups and downs, but we've stayed close, especially after we both moved to different cities. We'd always made a point to visit each other regularly, and though we don't see each other every month, We always stay in touch through calls and messages. Our friendship has been built on mutual respect, and I've always tried to be there for her, even when things were tough. A few months ago, Emily reached out to tell me that she had finally set a date for her wedding. I was genuinely happy for her because I knew how important this was to her. She had been dating her fiancé for a few years, and I knew that they were both really excited about the wedding. At first, everything seemed like it was going to be smooth sailing. She told me the wedding was going to be held in a city a few hours away from where I live, and she hoped I would be able to make it. I had already planned a vacation with my partner, Mark, 33M, for the exact same weekend. We had been planning this trip for almost a year, and it was a much-needed break for both of us. We were going to visit a national park to do some hiking, spend time away from the daily grind, and just relax. We had made all the necessary bookings months in advance. I told Emily about the trip when she mentioned her wedding date and immediately explained that I wouldn't be able to make it because of the vacation plans. At first, Emily seemed understanding. She told me she totally understood and appreciated me letting her know ahead of time. But a few weeks later, she contacted me again, saying that she really needed me at her wedding and that it would mean the world to her if I could be there. She told me that it wouldn't be the same without me, and I was one of her closest friends. I was a little taken aback by how persistent she was. I explained again that I had already made vacation plans and that it wasn't possible for me to cancel them last minute, especially given how much we had been looking forward to it. The situation escalated after this. Emily sent me a long message saying that she was hurt by my response. She told me that I was being selfish by choosing a vacation over her wedding and that it felt like I didn't care about her. She said she understood that I had plans, but this was an important day in her life, and she didn't want to feel abandoned by the people she loved. She even suggested that I could just change my vacation dates and reschedule the trip for another time. She said it wouldn't be that hard, and I could make it work. Now, I was starting to feel really uncomfortable. I'd already made it clear that this vacation had been planned for a long time, and I didn't want to cancel. I didn't want to disappoint Mark either, who had been really looking forward to this time away. It wasn't that I didn't care about Emily. It was just that I felt like my personal plans shouldn't have to be compromised just to attend her wedding, especially when I had communicated this well in advance. I tried to explain this to her, but she was persistent. She kept messaging me about how important this was to her and how she would be devastated if I didn't come. The more she pushed, the more frustrated I became. It felt like she was trying to guilt-trip me into choosing her wedding over something I had been looking forward to for months. Finally, I told her that I couldn't change my vacation plans and that I wouldn't be able to attend the wedding. I emphasized that I still cared about her and wished her all the best, but that I simply couldn't cancel a trip that I had already committed to. I also said that I would love to catch up with her once I returned from my vacation. Emily didn't take it well. She became really upset and started saying things like, "I don't know if I can forgive you for this, and I thought you were one of my best friends, but I guess I was wrong." I tried to explain that I understood her feelings, but that I didn't think I was doing anything wrong by sticking to my prior commitments. After that, the communication between us started to die down. She stopped responding to my texts and unfriended me on social media, which honestly stung. I didn't think things would escalate like this over a wedding, but I was still trying to respect her feelings while also staying firm on my own. It's been a few weeks now since all of this happened, and things are still tense between us. Emily hasn't spoken to me since I told her I wouldn't be attending the wedding, and I haven't heard anything about the wedding itself. It feels like she's cut me off, and I've started questioning whether I made the right choice. I know weddings are a big deal, but I don't think I should have had to cancel my vacation just because she wanted me to be there. At the same time, I do feel guilty that she's upset with me. I keep wondering if I should have tried harder to accommodate her request, or if I should have at least been more flexible in figuring out some way to make both work. AITA for not canceling my vacation plans to attend my best friend's wedding? Should I have tried harder to make it work? Or is it unreasonable for her to expect me to choose her wedding over something I had already planned for months? AITA for refusing to attend my best friend's birthday party after she uninvited me? I, 26F, have been best friends with Grace, 27F, since we were in high school. We've been through a lot together, from moving to different cities for college, to navigating relationships, and all the ups and downs of adulthood. We have always been incredibly close, and I've always considered her like a sister. This year, Grace is planning her 27th birthday party, which she's been talking about for months. She's always been a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to events, and she wanted this birthday to be bigger and better than any she'd had before. She had planned to host it at a nice restaurant, inviting all her close friends, family, and a few people from work. She even told me that it would be a big celebration with a fancy dinner, drinks, and a small after-party at a nearby bar. I was excited for her, and we'd been texting about the details for weeks leading up to it. She had even asked me to help with some of the planning, which I gladly did, including helping her pick out a dress and giving her suggestions for the menu. The first red flag appeared a couple of weeks ago. Grace mentioned, somewhat casually, that she was thinking of limiting the guest list to just her closest friends and family. She didn't give me any further details, and I didn't think too much of it at the time. But then, about a week before the party, she texted me saying she needed to talk. I thought it was going to be something minor, but it turned out to be a big deal. She told me that she had decided to cut down on the number of people she invited and that she wouldn't be able to invite me anymore. She said it was nothing personal, but that she just wanted to have a smaller, more intimate gathering. I was completely blindsided. Grace had never been someone who acted this way, and I had been helping her with this whole party planning process. I asked her what had changed, and she said she was just feeling overwhelmed and that she wanted the event to be low stress for her. I was devastated, and I couldn't understand what had happened. I had always been a huge part of her life and had been involved in every major event she'd had. I helped her through breakups, tough work situations, and other personal struggles. To suddenly be uninvited felt like a punch in the gut. She claimed that the guest list was getting too long, and she needed to make some cuts. But here's the thing. I know for a fact that she invited some other people who are not as close to her as I am. People I'd never even met before. It felt like a slap in the face. After receiving her text, I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. I left a voicemail asking for clarification, and she called me back a few hours later. In the conversation, she reiterated that it wasn't personal, but she kept saying she just wanted a smaller party. I asked her why I was the one cut from the list, and she said, "It's just easier this way. I didn't want to have to explain to anyone why you were coming and why others weren't." To this day, I still don't understand that reasoning. I don't think it's unreasonable for me to expect a bit more transparency and honesty. I was upset, and I told her I didn't think it was fair, but she insisted it was her decision, and there was nothing I could do about it. She apologized, but the whole conversation left me feeling hurt and rejected. At this point, I felt like I was being asked to accept a decision that was both inconsiderate and frankly rude. I've tried to process my feelings over the past few days, and I'm still struggling. I've been talking to a few mutual friends, and it seems like Grace has been telling them that it was just a matter of cutting out the drama from her life. One of them told me that Grace had mentioned me in a conversation and said I was too much of an emotional person for the party. I felt like this was a cheap excuse to justify her actions. It's not like I was going to show up and cause a scene. I was just excited to celebrate with her. The thing is, Grace is known for being someone who doesn't like confrontation and avoids difficult conversations. I've always been there for her, even when she's done things I didn't agree with, and I've always tried to be a good friend. So it really stings that she couldn't be upfront with me about the real reasons she didn't want me there. I would have respected her more if she had just been honest with me instead of making excuses. It feels like she's pushing me away when all I've done is be supportive. Now, I'm faced with a dilemma. The party is coming up soon, and I've been debating whether or not to confront her about it. A part of me wants to be understanding and tell her that I'll respect her wishes, but another part of me feels like I deserve more than this. I feel like I've been discarded and that this friendship isn't as important to her as it is to me. I don't know if I should just let it go or if I should stand up for myself and tell her how hurt I am. I also can't help but wonder if I should even bother attending the party, even though I've been uninvited. I'm tempted to show up anyway and confront her face to face. But at the same time, I don't want to cause unnecessary drama, and I know that doing something like that would likely make things worse between us. In the end, I just don't know what to do. I've always tried to be a good friend to Grace, but right now, it feels like she's treating me as disposable. AITA for refusing to attend her birthday party after she uninvited me? Or am I overreacting? Should I try to make amends or move on and accept that this friendship is no longer the same? AITA for telling my sister that her constant need for attention is exhausting and ruining my relationship with my partner? I, 32M, have a younger sister, Emily, 27F, and we've always had a close relationship growing up. Our parents have always been supportive and loving, and while we've had our disagreements over the years, we've usually been able to work through them. However, recently, things have been getting tense between Emily and me, particularly because of the way she behaves around my partner, Rachel, 30F. To give you some context, I've been in a relationship with Rachel for almost 2 years now, and things are going really well. We've already started talking about moving in together, and I can see a future with her. We get along well with each other's families, but there's been one issue that has been causing a lot of tension: Emily. Over the past few months, I've noticed that Emily has been increasingly needy and attention-seeking whenever Rachel and I are around. It's not that she's asking for help or support. It's more about the fact that she seems to have this constant need to be the center of attention. Whenever we're together, she will talk over everyone, tell exaggerated stories about herself, or make everything about her. It's exhausting. At first, Rachel and I try to be patient. We assumed it was just a phase, or maybe Emily was going through something. But the behavior kept escalating. Emily would interrupt conversations just to say something about her own life, even if it was completely irrelevant. For example, if Rachel and I were talking about a movie we saw last weekend, Emily would jump in with, "Oh, I've seen that too. I went with a group of friends, and it was so much more fun because they made it a whole event." It was as if she couldn't handle the idea that anyone else could have an experience worth sharing. Rachel, being a naturally kind and patient person, would always try to include Emily, but Emily would brush off any attempts to change the subject or redirect the conversation. The worst part is that when we tried to make plans or talk about something that was important to us, Emily would make it all about herself. I remember one time when Rachel and I were talking about the potential of moving in together, and Emily immediately started talking about how much she hated her apartment and how she wished she could just get out of her lease. The entire conversation shifted from our future plans to her complaints about her living situation. It left me feeling like my relationship was being overshadowed by my sister's constant need for validation and attention. At first, I chalked it up to her personality. Emily has always been a little self-centered, but it never felt this bad before. But as things started getting more serious between Rachel and me, I began to see how much this behavior was affecting not just me, but also Rachel. Rachel would get frustrated and upset after these interactions, but she would never say anything directly to Emily. I could tell she was growing tired of it, and it started to feel like I was stuck in the middle. After another awkward situation where Emily interrupted a conversation about our anniversary plans to talk about her weekend with friends, I decided I needed to have a conversation with her. I felt like it was time to address how her actions were affecting me, Rachel, and even our relationship. I tried to approach the topic gently, but I'm not the best at sugarcoating things, so it ended up being more direct than I planned. I sat Emily down and said, "Look, I need to talk to you about something that's been bothering me for a while. I love you, but your constant need for attention is getting exhausting, and it's starting to create tension between Rachel and me. Whenever we're together, you always manage to turn the focus onto yourself, and it's really hard for me and Rachel to have a conversation without you interrupting or making it all about your problems. It's honestly starting to feel like you don't care about what we're saying." Emily looked stunned. At first, she seemed genuinely confused, and then she started to get defensive. She said, "I don't see why you're making this such a big deal. I'm just talking about my life, and I'm sorry if that bothers you, but I'm your sister. I'm just trying to connect." I told her that I understood she was trying to connect, but the way she was doing it was not helpful. "It's not just about connecting," I said. "It's about taking the time to listen and show interest in other people's lives too. Rachel and I need to be able to talk and share things without feeling like we're being constantly interrupted. You don't always have to be the center of attention." At this point, Emily started to get emotional, which I wasn't expecting. She said, "Why do you think I always want attention? I'm just trying to be part of your life, and you're shutting me out." Do you think I want to be like this? You don't even know what I've been dealing with. She went on to mention how she felt like she was always overlooked and how she didn't have enough good things happening in her life. So she had to make herself feel important in any way she could. I felt bad hearing that, but at the same time, I couldn't let her continue to derail our conversations just because she was struggling. I told her that I wasn't trying to shut her out, but that the way she was behaving was making me and Rachel feel like we couldn't have space in our own relationship. I explained that it wasn't about her problems, but about the constant pattern of her seeking attention whenever we try to talk about something important. The conversation didn't go as well as I hoped. Emily got upset, and the more I explained, the more she seemed to close off. By the end, she stormed out of my apartment, saying I was being unfair and didn't understand her. I tried texting her to apologize if I hurt her feelings, but she didn't respond. The next few days were tense, and when we saw each other at family gatherings, things felt incredibly awkward. I knew I had hurt her, but I didn't know how to make it right. Now, my family is divided. Some of them agree that I was just trying to set boundaries, while others think I was too harsh on Emily. Rachel is stuck in the middle too, and while she agrees that Emily's behavior has been frustrating, she doesn't want to be the cause of tension in my family. Emily hasn't spoken to me directly about the conversation since, and I'm starting to wonder if I went too far. So, AITA for telling my sister that her constant need for attention is exhausting and ruining my relationship with my partner? Should I have handled it differently? Or was I justified in calling her out for this behavior? AITA for refusing to let my sister move in with me after she made me feel like a terrible person for wanting to keep my boundaries? I, 31M, have a sister, Amanda, 29F, who has been struggling with her life choices for the past few years. We grew up in a pretty chaotic household, and while our parents did their best, there were a lot of things we had to navigate on our own. I love Amanda, but she has always had a tendency to make decisions that don't always have the best outcomes. Over the years, I've tried to be supportive, but there comes a point where enough is enough. A few months ago, Amanda called me out of the blue asking if she could move in with me. She was having some issues with her living situation and needed a place to stay temporarily. Now, I'm not the kind of person who says no to family, especially not to my sister, so I said I'd think about it and get back to her. At this point, Amanda had been living with her boyfriend, but they had broken up, and she was having trouble finding a new place to live. I figured she just needed a little help getting back on her feet. But the more I thought about it, the more I started feeling uneasy. Amanda and I have always had a complicated relationship. She tends to be very impulsive and doesn't always think things through, which often causes problems. In the past, I've let her stay with me for short periods, and each time, there have been issues. She doesn't respect boundaries, she's loud, and she doesn't clean up after herself. I'm not saying she's a bad person, but when we live together, it tends to create a lot of tension between us. I've always been the more responsible one in the family, and I often feel like I'm the one who's left picking up the pieces when things go wrong. I've also noticed that Amanda has a pattern of burning bridges with people in her life. She tends to get into conflicts with friends, roommates, and boyfriends, and when things go south, she expects others to fix everything for her. It's like she doesn't learn from her mistakes, and she never fully takes responsibility for her actions. I love her, but I've reached a point where I don't want to keep enabling her behavior. A few days after she initially asked, I sat down and thought about it some more. I realized that I didn't want to bring all of that chaos into my home. I've worked hard to create a peaceful, organized environment, and I value my space. I've been living alone for a few years, and while I'm open to having people over occasionally, I don't want someone staying with me indefinitely, especially someone who has a history of making poor decisions and causing drama. I also don't feel like I should be responsible for her getting her life together, especially when she hasn't shown that she's willing to change. I called her up and gently explained that while I loved her and wanted to support her, I didn't think it was a good idea for her to move in with me. I told her that I needed my space and that I wasn't in a position to help her in the way she was asking. I offered to help her look for apartments or offer some financial assistance if she needed it, but I made it clear that I wasn't willing to have her live with me. I thought I was being respectful and setting a healthy boundary. Her reaction was not what I expected. She got upset and accused me of being selfish. She said that I didn't care about her and that if I truly loved her, I would help her out in her time of need. She told me that I was the only person she could turn to, and that by refusing to let her stay with me, I was abandoning her. She said I was acting like I was better than her, and that it was unfair of me to make her feel like a burden when she had no one else. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not caring about her, but about needing to protect my own well-being and my space. I told her that I had to be honest with myself about what I could handle, and that living together again wasn't something I was comfortable with. I reminded her that I've helped her out in the past in other ways, but I couldn't keep putting myself in situations where I felt drained and resentful. But Amanda didn't want to hear any of it. She hung up on me, and we didn't speak for a few days. Since then, things have only gotten worse. Amanda has been sending me messages, calling me a terrible person, and accusing me of being an awful brother. She says I'm turning my back on her when she needs me most. She's also been telling our family members about what happened, and now they're all calling me, telling me that I should be helping my sister out. Our parents, in particular, are upset with me, saying that as family, I should put her first. They've been really pressuring me, telling me that I'm being too harsh and that I need to just get over my boundaries and help her. I tried explaining to them that I have my reasons, but they don't seem to understand. They say that I'm being unsympathetic and that I'm acting like I don't care about Amanda's struggles. They also keep reminding me of all the times Amanda has helped me in the past, which, to be honest, is not as many as they think. I've tried to point out that I'm not saying no forever, just that I can't do this right now, but it feels like everyone is ganging up on me. Now, I'm feeling really torn. I know I'm allowed to set boundaries, and I'm not obligated to sacrifice my mental health or comfort for the sake of someone else, even if they're family. But at the same time, I can't shake the guilt. I keep thinking that maybe I could have been more understanding. Maybe I should have just let her stay for a little while and helped her get back on her feet. I don't want to lose my relationship with her, but I also don't want to put myself in a situation where I feel constantly drained. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister move in with me after she made me feel like a terrible person for wanting to keep my boundaries. Edit asterisk, I just want to thank everyone who commented. It's been really helpful to hear all your perspectives. I've also received a lot of messages, and I'm trying to respond to as many as I can. A few things to clarify. 1. I'm not saying I'll never help her again. I just don't think it's healthy for me to let her move in. I've been supporting her emotionally and financially for years, but this is something I'm not comfortable with right now. 2. I've had a history of being her safety net, and while I don't mind helping, I feel like this is a pattern that's not getting better. I'm worried that I'll end up enabling her instead of helping her make real changes. 3. I'm still in touch with her, but it's been tense. I don't know what the future of our relationship will look like, but I'm trying to stick to my boundaries without feeling guilty. Thanks again for all the feedback. It's been an eye-opener for me. AITA for refusing to let my parents stay at my house after they criticized my lifestyle choices. I, 30F, have always had a somewhat strained relationship with my parents. We get along well enough, but they have a tendency to judge my choices, especially when it comes to my career and lifestyle. I grew up in a very traditional family, where the idea of success was rooted in things like stability, traditional jobs, marriage, and owning property. Over the years, I made a lot of decisions that don't exactly fit into their mold. For example, I don't have a typical 9-to-5 job. I work as a freelance graphic designer and have built a career that allows me to work from home, set my own hours, and travel when I want. I'm financially stable, but I don't have a house or a mortgage. I rent an apartment in a city that I love, and I don't have any immediate plans to buy a property. I'm single, and I'm okay with it. I love my freedom and independence, and I don't feel pressured to live life the way my parents think I should. I've always been honest with my parents about my choices, but they don't understand. They've always been kind of disappointed that I didn't follow a more traditional path. They think I should have a steady job, a house, and a family by now. They've told me repeatedly that I'm not living up to my potential and that I'm wasting my time with freelancing. Every time we talk, the conversation inevitably shifts to how I should settle down and take things more seriously. Recently, my parents reached out and asked if they could visit me for a week. They live about a 3-hour drive away, and while I don't see them often, I usually make an effort to visit when I can. This time, However, I was a little hesitant. The last few visits had been tense, and I wasn't sure I wanted them staying at my place for a week. But I also didn't want to seem rude, so I agreed. The first couple of days went okay. They made some comments about how small my apartment was and how they couldn't believe I didn't own a house yet. I brushed it off, knowing that they'd always been critical about my living situation. But things started to go downhill quickly when my parents started to criticize my career. One evening, while we were eating dinner, my mom casually mentioned how unpredictable freelancing must be and how I would never get ahead without a stable job. My dad chimed in, saying that it was a shame I didn't have a 9-to-5 job with benefits like normal people. They both went on about how I was just scraping by and how I was wasting my time on something that would never give me the stability I needed. They asked me why I wasn't trying to work for a bigger company and why I didn't just get a real job. I could feel my blood pressure rising, but I tried to keep calm. I told them that I was happy with my career, that freelancing allowed me to have more flexibility and freedom, and that I was financially stable. I also mentioned that I didn't feel the need to follow the traditional path they expected of me. But my mom wouldn't let it go. She asked why I didn't have a partner, why I wasn't thinking about marriage and kids, and why I hadn't settled down like all of my friends had. She said I was getting too old to be living this way and that I should be more responsible. My dad added that I should be planning for the future and not wasting time on things that don't matter. At that point, I had had enough. I told them that I didn't appreciate the way they were criticizing my life choices. I told them that I didn't need their approval and that my life was my own. I also told them that if they couldn't respect my decisions, then maybe it wasn't a good idea for them to stay at my place anymore. My parents were shocked. My mom started crying, saying that I was being unfair and that they were just worried about me. My dad got defensive, saying I was being too sensitive and that they were only trying to help me. They both accused me of overreacting and said that I was being disrespectful for not letting them express their concerns. I told them that I had made my peace with my life choices, and while I appreciated their concern, it wasn't necessary. I also told them that I didn't want them staying at my house if they were just going to continue criticizing me and making me feel like I wasn't good enough. The rest of the visit was incredibly awkward. They stayed in a hotel for the remainder of their time, and we barely spoke. I tried to keep the peace, but it was clear that things were strained between us. They left a few days earlier than planned, and since then, we've barely talked. My mom has texted me a few times, apologizing for what happened, but I feel like I need space. I'm still upset by the way they treated me and how they made me feel like I wasn't living up to their expectations. Now, I'm feeling conflicted. I know my parents love me, but it's hard not to feel hurt by the way they treated me during their visit. Part of me feels guilty for kicking them out, but another part of me feels like I stood up for myself in a way that I hadn't before. I don't want to push them away, but I also don't want to keep sacrificing my happiness just to meet their expectations. AITA for refusing to let my parents stay at my house after they criticized my career and lifestyle choices? Should I have handled the situation differently? Or did I have every right to stand my ground? AITA for confronting my parents about their favoritism toward my younger brother? I, 30F, am the eldest of 3 children. My younger brother, Jake, 25M, and my younger sister, Emily, 22F, are both great people, but there's always been a noticeable difference in the way our parents treat us. Growing up, I was the responsible one, the one who took care of things when they needed to be done. I was the one who helped with household chores, did well in school, and basically followed the rules. My brother Jake, on the other hand, was always more rebellious. He would skip school, get in trouble with the law, and just generally act out. Emily, who was much younger, kind of floated through childhood, getting by with minimal effort, but she was cute, so my parents never really pushed her too hard. My parents have always been quick to praise Jake and Emily for their spontaneity and free spirits. They would laugh off Jake's mistakes and justify his actions with comments like, "Boys will be boys," or "he's just going through a phase." When he dropped out of college, they didn't say much. They helped him get a job, and though they told him to try harder, they never really held him accountable for his lack of responsibility. Emily, on the other hand, could do no wrong. She was the baby, and she got away with pretty much everything. No matter what trouble she got into, my parents always seemed to find a way to excuse her actions. Then there's me. I was the perfect kid, doing everything right. The one who excelled in school, followed all the rules, and was responsible to the point of burnout. But despite my good behavior, I was never given the same level of praise or attention. If anything, I often felt like an afterthought. If I did something good, my parents would just say, "That's expected of you." But when Jake or Emily did anything remotely positive, it was treated like a huge achievement. My accomplishments were taken for granted, and my sacrifices were ignored. And the worst part was that my parents never even seemed to notice the double standard. Over the years, I've tried to express my feelings about the way I've been treated, but every time I bring it up, they brush me off. "We don't have favorites," they would say. "You're all equally important to us." But their actions never matched their words. After a while, I just stopped trying to get them to see it. I figured it was pointless to fight for attention that I was never going to get. I focused on my own life and tried to move on. Then came last year. Jake had moved back in with my parents after another failed attempt at living independently. He had dropped out of his second college program, was unemployed, and wasn't really doing anything to improve his situation. Emily, who had just graduated college, was getting ready to go on an extended vacation with her friends, and my parents were throwing her a big celebration before she left. During the family dinner, Emily talked about her plans, and my parents showered her with praise and gifts, talking about how proud they were of everything she'd accomplished. Then, as if it was an afterthought, my dad mentioned that they had a little something for Jake too, but it was mostly just a token gift to make him feel included. It was a new pair of sneakers that they'd gotten for him because he needed a new pair. But I could tell it wasn't just about the sneakers. It was about the fact that they felt the need to give him something just to placate him. Meanwhile, I had just completed a major career milestone. I had been promoted to a senior role in my company, something that I had worked tirelessly for. I had spent years busting my ass, working overtime, taking on projects, and sacrificing my social life to get to this point. But when I mentioned my promotion during the dinner, my parents barely reacted. My mom said, "That's great, honey. We always knew you'd do well," and then immediately turned the conversation back to Emily's vacation and Jake's sneakers. That was the final straw for me. I had reached my breaking point, and I finally lost it. After the dinner, I told my parents that I needed to have a serious conversation with them. They were confused at first, but once I started speaking, everything came out. I told them that I was tired of always being the responsible one, the one who never got any recognition for my achievements, the one who had to pick up the slack every time Jake messed up or Emily needed help. I told them how hurtful it was to constantly see them treat Jake and Emily like their mistakes didn't matter, while I've been held to an impossibly high standard my entire life. I told them that I felt like I was invisible, that my accomplishments didn't matter, and that my sacrifices were always overlooked. My parents were taken aback, and at first, they tried to defend themselves, saying that they loved us all the same and didn't have favorites. But I told them it wasn't about favoritism in the traditional sense. It was about how they prioritized their attention and how they only seemed to notice me when I did something wrong. When I was responsible, it was expected. When Jake or Emily did something, it was celebrated. And I couldn't handle it anymore. After my outburst, there was a long silence. My parents didn't know how to respond. They apologized, but I didn't feel like they truly understood what I was saying. My mom said that she didn't realize how much I'd been carrying, and my dad seemed genuinely confused, saying that he thought he had treated us all fairly. They told me they would try to do better, but I'm not sure I believe them. Now, a few months later, things have been somewhat tense. My parents have tried to be more mindful of their actions, but I can't shake the feeling that they're still favoring Jake and Emily in subtle ways. It's not as blatant as before, but I can tell they're still offering him more emotional support and validation than they ever give me. And while I've tried to let it go, it still stings. So, here's where I'm at. I don't feel like I've gotten the closure I need, and part of me wonders if I'm overreacting. Should I have just kept my feelings to myself and let things continue as they were? Or did I have every right to confront them about the way I've been treated? AITA for calling out my parents for their favoritism? Am I just being too sensitive? AITA for refusing to let my best friend stay with me after she lied about her financial situation? So, Here's the situation. I, 29M, have a best friend, Tara, 30F, who I've known since we were both in high school. We've always had each other's backs, and I've always considered her family. Over the years, she's gone through a number of difficult times, and I've supported her as much as I could. But recently, things took a turn, and I'm honestly feeling conflicted about how I handled it. Tara's been struggling financially for a while, which she's been very open about. She's always been a bit of a free spirit, someone who likes to live in the moment, and hasn't been the best at saving or budgeting. Over the past year, she had to move in with her parents after she lost her job, and it seemed like she was just trying to figure things out. But every time I talked to her, she'd act like everything was fine, brushing off any concerns I had about her situation. A few months ago, Tara came to me asking if she could stay at my place for a few weeks. She said she was having issues with her parents, that she needed some space to get back on her feet, and that she'd been offered a new job opportunity that would be starting soon. She told me that she had saved enough money to cover her expenses for a couple of months, and that she just needed a place to stay while things settled down. I agreed, no problem. After all, she's my best friend, and I wanted to help her. She moved in with me, and the first few days went well. We were catching up, hanging out, and I thought this would be a great opportunity for her to get back on track. But pretty quickly, things started to feel off. She wasn't looking for jobs like she said she would, and she was constantly asking me for money for things like groceries and bills. I was trying to be understanding, but it was becoming clear that she wasn't being upfront with me about her financial situation. One night, after a few weeks of this, I decided to take a look at our shared bank account for some of the household expenses. I noticed a few odd charges, things like expensive takeout, shopping sprees, and subscriptions to streaming services I knew she hadn't had before. I was really taken aback. I confronted her about it, and at first, she got defensive. She tried to downplay it, saying it was just a little extra spending, and that she would pay me back once her job started. But it didn't add up. I decided to press her a bit more, and that's when she came clean about the truth. She hadn't actually gotten the job she'd told me about. In fact, she hadn't even applied to anything recently. She admitted that she had been living off her credit cards and had been relying on me to cover most of her expenses. She also confessed that the issues with her parents were exaggerated, and she was actually just trying to avoid dealing with her mounting debt. I was stunned. I felt completely betrayed. She had lied to me, not only about her job situation, but also about her finances. She made it seem like she was doing everything right and just needed a little help. But the reality was much different. I was furious, but I also felt sorry for her. I knew she was in a tough spot, but the dishonesty really stung. After she admitted the truth, I told her that I couldn't continue to support her financially like this. I told her that she needed to figure out a plan to get back on her feet and that I wasn't comfortable with her staying with me under these circumstances. She begged me to let her stay a little longer, promising that she would get everything in order, but I was firm. I told her that she had crossed a line by not being honest with me, and it wasn't fair for me to carry that burden. She was upset, understandably so, and started crying, saying that she didn't know what she was going to do. She kept telling me how much I had meant to her over the years and how she had nowhere else to go. It was heartbreaking to see her in that state, but I couldn't let my feelings cloud my judgment. I stuck to my decision and told her that she had to leave by the end of the week. Tara ended up leaving that Friday, and I haven't heard from her much since. A few mutual friends reached out to me, saying that they didn't understand why I had kicked her out, especially since she was going through such a hard time. Some of them even told me I was being too harsh, that I should have helped her more, or at least let her stay until she found another place. But I feel like I was justified. She lied to me, took advantage of my generosity, and didn't take responsibility for her own situation. I love her, but I couldn't just continue enabling her behavior. Now, I'm starting to wonder if I made the right decision. Maybe I was too quick to push her out, especially when she was in such a vulnerable place. I know she struggled in the past, but I don't think it's fair for her to take advantage of me or put me in a position where I feel obligated to take care of her mistakes. I really don't know if I did the right thing or if I should have been more understanding. So, AITA for refusing to let my best friend stay with me after she lied about her financial situation? Was I too harsh in kicking her out? Or was I justified in setting boundaries? AITA for refusing to let my parents use my home as a vacation spot when they've never visited me before? I, 28F, recently bought my first house after years of saving up and working hard to get financially stable. It's been a huge milestone for me, and I'm really proud of the space I've created. My parents, 55M, 54F, have always been supportive, but we've never had the closest relationship. Growing up, I was often the one to handle my own problems, and my parents weren't exactly hands-on. They both worked long hours and didn't get involved in my day-to-day life as much as other parents might have. I moved out at 18 for college and never really went back home. Over the years, my relationship with my parents became more distant. We talk, but I've never felt like I've had a deep emotional connection with them. We catch up on holidays, I visit them occasionally, but it's never been the kind of relationship where I share everything about my personal life. They're nice enough, but there's always been a certain level of detachment. A few weeks ago, my parents called me and said they were planning a vacation to the area I live in. They mentioned that they'd been wanting to visit for a while and thought it would be a good opportunity to come see my new house. I was happy to hear that they were interested in visiting, but quickly became uncomfortable when they asked if they could stay with me during their visit. I had only been living in my house for about 6 months, and it still felt like my private space. To be honest, I was not thrilled by the idea of having them stay with me. I value my privacy and have always been someone who needs space to recharge, and having my parents in my home for an extended period felt like it would cross a boundary. I thought about it for a few days, trying to figure out how to respond. I'm close enough to my parents that I didn't want to upset them, but I knew deep down that I wasn't comfortable with the idea. I had never invited them to visit before, mainly because they didn't seem interested in visiting me or my life when I was away at school or in my previous apartments. They never made an effort to come see me unless it was for a specific occasion, and even then, it was more out of obligation than genuine interest. I didn't want to come across as ungrateful or hurt their feelings, but at the same time, I didn't feel like I owed them the privilege of staying in my home, especially when they had never made an effort to visit me in the past. So, I had a conversation with them. I told them that while I would love to see them, I wasn't comfortable having them stay at my house. I explained that I needed to set boundaries in my new space and that I felt it would be better for us to spend time together outside of my home, maybe going out to dinner or staying in a nearby hotel. I emphasized that this wasn't about not wanting to see them, but that I simply wasn't ready to have guests stay with me in my personal space yet. I also mentioned that I hadn't had many visitors at all and wanted to ease into having people over slowly. They were not happy with my response. My dad was the first to react, saying that they were planning to spend money on travel and didn't want to have to pay for a hotel room when they could just stay with me. He made it clear that he thought I was being selfish for not offering them a place to stay, especially since it was my turn to host now that I had a house. He said that I should be grateful they were coming at all and that it was unreasonable to expect them to stay somewhere else when they were visiting specifically to see me. My mom was quieter but seemed disappointed. She didn't say much, but later sent me a message saying that she felt hurt by my decision and that it seemed like I didn't want them to be a part of my life. The conversation has been eating at me. I've always been the responsible one in the family, the one who tries to make everyone happy and keeps the peace. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had done nothing wrong by setting this boundary. My parents have always been the ones to come and go as they please, but when it comes to me, I've always had to make the effort. I wanted them to show some interest in my life, not just when it's convenient for them. And in the past, whenever I'd visit them, it always felt like they were doing me a favor, not genuinely wanting to be part of my life. A few days after the conversation, my dad called me and gave me an ultimatum. He said that if I wasn't going to offer them a place to stay, then they wouldn't be coming at all. He implied that if I didn't agree, it would hurt our relationship and that they might not visit for a long time. I was really taken aback by this. I had never been someone who enjoyed ultimatums, and it made me feel like my choice was being manipulated. I told him that I wasn't going to change my mind and that I would love to see them, but that they'd have to stay elsewhere. He didn't respond well to that and hung up on me. Since then, we haven't talked much. My mom has texted me a couple of times, but it's been awkward. I've had to spend some time reflecting on my feelings. I love my parents, but I don't want to be the person who always sacrifices their comfort for the sake of others. I've worked really hard to get to this point in my life, and it feels unfair that my decision to protect my space is making me the villain. Now, I'm feeling conflicted. On one hand, I think it's totally reasonable to want my space and to establish boundaries in my own home. On the other hand, I feel like I'm being unreasonable for not just making it work and offering them a place to stay. I keep thinking maybe I should have just compromised, but I'm also standing firm in my belief that my home is my personal space, and I'm not obligated to let anyone stay there if I'm not comfortable with it. So, AITA for refusing to let my parents stay at my house when they've never visited before and have never made an effort to be involved in my life on their terms. Edit asterisk after reading the comments. I want to clarify a few things. 1. I'm not opposed to my parents visiting. I've invited them to spend time with me, just not in my home. I suggested that we could meet up at a nice restaurant or a nearby hotel. It's just that I'm not comfortable with them staying in my space right now. 2. I've tried to express my feelings to them calmly and respectfully, but I'm still not sure if they understand my perspective. I don't want them to feel like I'm rejecting them, but I do want them to respect my boundaries. 3. I'm trying to balance my own needs with maintaining a healthy relationship with them. The last thing I want is for this to cause a permanent rift, but I also don't want to be guilted into something that makes me uncomfortable. Thanks for all the feedback. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.